Hey y'all, welcome to the Big Mama Was Wrong podcast. I'm your host Marisha, and here we dive into wellness and growth surrounding mental health and culture. Let's get into it. Hey y'all, it's Marisha back with another episode of Big Mama Was Wrong, and I'm super excited because today one of my guests that we have here is a guru or a subject matter expert. Some people refer to him as thought leaders, Dr. Price. So she's going to introduce herself, and then we're going to hop into the episode for today.
All right. Well, let me start off by saying thank you for inviting me. I'm super excited about this. I am Dr. Uzama Price. I'm a board certified behavior analyst, originally from Jamaica, and I've been living in the state of North Carolina for almost 18 years. I am a consultant. I consider myself to be a humanist. My passion is just basically children and their families. I completed my doctoral studies in education. I have postdoctoral training and certification in psychology, applied behavior analysis. And I worked for several years on a grant-funded project at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, on developing gratitude and how gratitude develops in children. And currently, I am working on my clinical mental health licensing and should wrap all of that up before the end of 2024. I have published a book, which I hope one day can be mandatory or required reading for anybody working in the field of disabilities. I have written curriculum and done training here in North Carolina, across the United States, Canada, and Jamaica. My repertoire, as I would call it, or what gets me excited and what I write about, everything is related in some way to people with disabilities. So whether that is talking about autism and dating, trauma and intellectual disability, positive behavior supports, supported employment, or how culture affects people's lives, anything related to improving the quality of life for people with disabilities and their family, that is really basically what I'm about and what I have done for the last 18 years. So that's me.
That's nice. I'm listening and I'm learning new things. I love the fact that you said you've published something that you hope to become mandatory. And why that's significant to me is even as a writer, I've never really set goals for the writing. I mean, obviously you want it disseminated and you want people to read it to be impacted, but to consider other desires that can be applicable to what you release, that's really inspiring. So thank you. Thank you so much for having us, or thank you so much for coming to be a part of the podcast. And thank you so much for sharing the information about you. First, how would you describe autism spectrum disorder?
Well, here's what I say about it. I think when people in the community, when they hear autism, to me, it appears that people who don't know, because of their lack of information, it becomes this scary thing. It becomes like, oh my God, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to touch this. This is too difficult. I've seen this on TV. I hear all of these things. And that is very concerning to me because we create situations that are not necessary and people become stigmatized because of a diagnosis. And I believe that people who are vulnerable or marginalized, we should do our very best to treat people right. But when we close doors and we don't allow them to be in our space because of a medical diagnosis, I find it to be heartbreaking. So when I think about autism, and because it's a passion of mine and I've done a lot of work, I look at it different. Now, parents, grandparents, loved ones, they don't see it that way. But for the stranger in the street, they just hear autism. They don't know what that is. And the way I look at it, I see it as this person's brain operates differently. It's no different than somebody who was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. And because I'm an inclusive person, I believe that regardless of how your brain operates or the things that you need, we have more things in common than we have what makes us different. So if I have to explain autism to somebody who is not really familiar, I may just say something, people are different. And folks with autism, they love structure. They want to know what they're going to do from 1 minute to the next. They may not want to talk to some people, while they may be engaged with others, or they may just really be that person who is introverted, that may be not wanting to socialize. They may like doing one specific thing, and that's their jam, and that's what they do. They may be talented at several things, but autism is no different than anything else. And when I think about it, and the years that I've worked with people with autism, I find that I have a lot of the same behaviors. The same things concern me. At my age, if you get up and you say, "Oh, Dr. Price, we are no longer going to be doing this, we're changing that." Yeah, I'm probably going to have an attitude. Now, my adaptive skills are great because I can cope with that. I may mutter, I may say some things, but I will get on board, you know. But some folks with autism, they may not like change. And it's not that they cannot handle change. It is the way in which we, as providers, as people in their spaces, is the way how we interact. Sometimes we don't give people the respect that they're due. And sometimes when we change a schedule or something doesn't work, we don't apologize. We don't validate people's feelings. So that person with autism may get very upset. And for them, when they're upset, it looks like it's a behavior. But as B.F. Skinner said, that when you control the environment, you'll see order in behavior. So if I can modify the environment to know that this person does have autism and they like structure and routine, then I'm going to honor their preferences. And if the schedule must change, I'm going to let you know in advance. And if I didn't have a choice in that, it starts raining and we're supposed to go to the park, I may say, "Hey, you know what, bud? I understand how you feel. I know when I get ready to do something and it's not working out, I'm not very happy." But we don't validate people's feelings. We don't strength spot, identify what this person does very well and capitalize on that. We tend to stick with all of the negatives. So when I'm discussing autism with folks, I rarely even talk about a diagnosis. I just say, "Hey, this is the way this person is. They may want solitude. They don't like bright lights. It may be a sensory thing. These things are hard for them to process." So you may see behavior if they're in a small room with lots of people around them. It's really tough for some people. They may not be able to process all of these incoming sensations. And because the people in the environment may not be aware of it, they continue to do things that creates more anxiety. And sometimes that person may have this really over exaggerated response to something that they shouldn't. But I always talk about environment, offering people choices, learning about what that person needs, and really just modifying the environment. Because one thing, we're not miracle workers, we're not going to cure anything. But I do know that if we train, if we advocate, if we model the appropriate behavior, we can do what we call environmental engineering, where we fix the environment. You and I are part of an environment. So if a person with autism walks in and I have all these lights on and I'm talking loud, and I realize the person may be pacing or they have a frown on their face, if I alter my behavior, maybe turn off the lights and not talk so loud, that could possibly make that other person feel comfortable. So I look at it as environmental engineering, or, modification of the environment or stimuli, because everything, could cause a problem. And a lot of times we don't know what people need. And that's why it's important for us to get to know people instead of making assumptions.
Very true. So there were a couple of things you were pulling out as it related to sensory, about the bright lights, the loud noises, and being sticklers for structure. How would you say that it shows up in children particularly?
For kids, so the other day I was working with a 4-year-old last week, Saturday. And for kids, they may want to line up. This little boy he lined up all his toys. He likes that structure. He wants to know, "Mommy, after I play, are we going to go to the park?" Then we get to go to Wendy's for my Frosty or something like that. So he wants to know what the whole day or what the evening is going to look like because dad, it was going to some overnight golf thing. And he wanted to know what are going to be these fun things he's going to do with mom. So he has a routine. He knows by 4 o'clock he's napping. He knows when he gets up from his nap, he's going to get his snack. He gets to play and build his Legos. And he knows after he does that, his mom starts to count down. When the egg timer goes off, he knows it's time to clean everything up and it's time to get his shoes and whatever. And they're moving to the next activity. Because when he doesn't have that routine, there's going to be anxiety. And he may worry, well, when am I going to do this? When am I going to do this? And that can, create tantruming when their needs are not being met. But I see a lot of orderly behavior. I see kids that may feel better if they're standing for a long period of time or they're rocking or they're walking around. When I see those types of behaviors, I literally will tell providers that we shouldn't get people to alter their behavior. So if I have to rock back and forth and that feels good to me, why do I have to stop that person from rocking, right? Because it's not disturbing you, it's not disturbing anybody. So there are some things I like to come at supporting people from a trauma informed lens, like not trying to restrict somebody's movement because they're flapping their hands. That's not bothering anyone, right? And if I have to do that, what's the big deal? Some years ago, I told a provider who, they had written a goal that they wanted the hand flapping and the stemming to stop. And I was at a school collecting data. And once I finished with the data collection, I said to the teacher, it's so funny that you're saying that these children need to stop doing these behaviors, but I collected data on you. And she was just like, what? You're supposed to be collecting data on the kids. I said, yeah, but I just want to level set for you that you twirled your hair 30 times within the last 45 minutes. And I bet nobody tried to get a behavior plan together for you to not twirl your hair.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like normal for you to twirl your hair because, she was just like, while she was talking. So naturally, it's distracting and I was looking at it. So I thought, let me just show her because they really, the concern was the stemming and they said I was disruptive, but I went on 3 different days at 3 different times, stood in different parts of the room just so I could observe. And this particular kid, he wasn't doing anything that was different than the other kids. So why did you focus on that child?
Mhm. So, what is it called whenever people are rocking because it's comfortable for them? What is that called?
It's a stemming behavior. It's it's
Okay.
it's stemming, it's rocking, it feels good. If you think about our senses, a lot of times we are focused more on smell, taste, and touch, right?
Mhm.
But really, we have 7 senses. The way we're able to balance ourselves when we're walking, the way we, may go up and down stairs, that takes some balance, right? That takes some being able to navigate things. We think about the person with all of these senses. So it's not only about the things I smell, the things I can touch, the things I can hear, or the things I can see. Sometimes people may not have where we say they're hyposensitive or they're hypersensitive. Sometimes, have you ever seen a kid that when they hug you, the hug is really like really intense and they squeeze
Mhm.
you really, really tight?
Mhm.
Like they need that and they're not getting that naturally.
Mhm.
So again, we modify the environment. I'm going to give you a nice hug. They may go to an occupational therapist that may say, hey, why don't you try a weighted vest? I had a young lady several years ago had occupational therapy in school and she'd aged out of that. And now, she's like 22. She's going to a day program. She figured out what she needed and everybody couldn't understand why is she wearing a backpack when there's no school, there's nothing going on. But she filled the backpack with lots of books and she would carry that all the time because that gave her that weight on her back and that helped her to feel balanced. And she basically told me that if she didn't do that, she was going to feel like she's flying or feel like she's not really grounded. I have kids that their bed needs to be right up against the wall. They don't want to feel like they're just floating in space. So I always say, whether you're a child or you're an adult, that we should advocate for occupational therapy to come in to see if there are things that they can do to help the person. I always advocate for physical therapy because some people may need that, and even speech therapy. All of those allied health services are always great, for supporting people. It's not only about going to your medication management provider or just going to see the primary care, right? It's like a recipe for success. We should have all of these specialists a part of the treatment team because we all look at the person from a different lens. We're seeing the same person, but we look at them from a different lens. And when we're working with people with autism or just intellectual disability in general, we need to look at them from that whole biopsychosocial framework, right? So I can't remember which professor came up with this, but I love the acronym they use is MEET, because in the behavior analysis world, we always talk about the functions of behavior. I want your attention. I want to escape from something that I find to be completely aversive. I may not like being in a room full of people, so I'm going to escape from that. You may have a really cool phone and I see you're playing a game and I want that. That's a tangible. So I'm going to take that from you or create a behavior so I can get it. The other thing that we talk about are behaviors that are sensory. These are behaviors that are not socially mediated. So I'm probably going to bounce all over the place if I'm by myself or if I'm in a room with people, because my behavior doesn't have anything to do with anyone else. So those are the functions of behavior. But because we are trauma informed, and I always tell people I practice what I call TIABA. Don't remember where else I've heard it, but people in general understand that we need to be trauma informed, right? And when we do that, if you look at what the National Association for the Dually Diagnosed said, because working with people with disabilities, and we know sometimes our folks, they've suffered trauma. The prevalence levels is all over the place, but we know that trauma is real, whether it's a big T trauma, like physical sexual abuse, or little T trauma, like you jump on TikTok and you make a video and people harass you in the comments because you can't dance like so and so. So big T trauma, little T trauma, all of those things are impactful. So the NAD says we should look at people from that biopsychosocial framework. What are those biological factors that could be driving behavior? When I work with families, I always say, tell me about the behavior because that's important. But before we run off and saying, oh, this person needs to be out of their home, oh, we need to put them on medication, as a best practice, and this is what I have learned from many of the people who are really experienced and has been working in this field, and I trust what they tell me, we always rule out medical first. That's the best practice. And when we rule out medical first, we may find out what's going on because behavior is a form of communication. And we can't always expect people, even when they have pragmatic language skills, receptive language skills, expressive language skills, and they can talk to us and tell us their favorite foods and all of that. We shouldn't expect that when people are not feeling well, their adaptive skills are so great that they're going to be able to be calm, explain to us, well, I had 4 slices of red velvet cake. Now my tummy hurts. We shouldn't expect that. We have to be like CSI Miami and try to figure these things out. So when I see behaviors, I always rule out medical because that is ethical. That's the right thing to do. So the behaviorists, they use the acronym MEET, which is medical, escape, because people, if you don't want to do something, you're probably going to delay it, avoid it, or something. So we've got medical, then we have that escape, avoidance, then we have attention. I may not get enough attention. And whether it's good or bad attention, as long as all eyes are on me and y'all are talking about me, I'm getting what I want. So we've got the attention, then we've got tangible. There may be something that I need and I just don't have the words to tell you. Or I've been reinforced for hitting in order to get a snack. And then there's sensory, that it doesn't matter where I am or who's there. If I'm by myself with a bunch of people, that behavior is still there. So, as a best practice for autism, for any disability, we should rule out medical first because behavior is a form of communication. And we know folks with disabilities, there are a lot of complicated medical things that could be going on. We could have folks with type 2 diabetes, we could have folks with traumatic brain injury, constipation, lots of other things, chronic UTI. And we know that people with autism, the literature tells us that gastrointestinal issues is rampant with this population. So since we know gastro issues are there, and we know a lot of people are on medications, and that also may cause constipation or stomach discomfort. These are all things that we need to do. So always want to rule out the medical because we know behavior is a form of communication, and that's just a best practice.
Okay. So that was one of the things that I was going to ask about how people can mistake symptoms of autism or the way that someone on the spectrum may process, how that may be confused with misbehaving. So
Yeah.
one of the I was watching a video of a kid in a barber shop where it looked like he was having a meltdown. So there were other barbers that were like coming to try to support the one barber because he didn't want to sit still. He didn't want the clippers in his head. And initially, at first glance, it does look like, oh, he's spoiled. But as I continued to look, I realized he actually may have had special needs. So the sensory from the noise, it could have been the touching, it could have been, what seemed like aggression, people invading his personal space. All those could have been triggers, for his sensory. So that's one of the things that I would like to kind of process with you about is whenever we're seeing children in public, wherever it may be, it could be the grocery store, wherever, how do you feel like we just as human beings, right? Aside from the parents or people that may know, how can we support or how can we respond in a more accepting, compassionate manner when we're seeing things like that?
I think empathy goes a long way. And I think when we turn around and we glare at people and things like that, it doesn't make the parents feel good. It doesn't make the care staff feel good. And it certainly doesn't make the person with a disability feels good.
Mm-hmm.
One thing about stigma, and people with disabilities are very smart. They figure out when they're liked, when they're wanted, when they're welcomed. And just that glare is enough to tell that person, you don't understand me. You're not even interested in that. But I always tell folks that sometimes if we mind our business and we ignore whatever's going on, the behavior may go away. But if you've got a child that's, or an adult that's really trying to hold it together and you take them to Walmart at 6 o'clock on a Saturday, like you're setting yourself up
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot going on. That may not be the time to go to the store. And if you don't have a choice and you must go to the store, then we have to come up with a plan. I'm either going to put on shades, earbuds, or, something to cover over, drown out the noise as best as we can, may listen to music, may get that person busy by saying, hey, I'm going to need you to push the cart. I'm going to get the items. You're going to tell me how many cans. You may be buying, food for group homes. You're going to need 20 things of toilet paper, stuff like that. You can get that person busy so they're not really focused like, oh, there's a lot going on. And we have to prep people and let them know we're going to be in here from this time to this time and count that down. But when we're just lazing and we're like, yeah, we're going to leave later, we're going to be in here for a while. Well, what does a while mean?
Mm-hmm.
I may have ADHD on top of everything, and I'm always in a hurry. So when you say a while, I'm thinking it's 1 second from now. but you
Mhm.
may need 25 minutes from now. And so you set me up to be frustrated because, you may be saying, in a little bit, we're going to leave in a little bit, that kind of thing. So I just think that if, again, I go back to environmental engineering or modifying the environment, if you know I may need the support and you have to be in those types of spaces, prepare me better, prepare the environment, and I may need to get on a line that's not a whole bunch of people. And even though I may like a cashier, I may have to go do self checkout if there are less people over there. So you've got to scope out the place, right?
Mhm.
And look to make sure what's going to be best. Because if you're standing and people are all crunched together, I can see that really making somebody very anxious.
Mhm. Makes sense. Can you touch on, because I've heard a lot where some people on the spectrum are dually diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah,
Could
yeah,
could you touch on that?
yeah, we see that a lot in the literature. And I don't think that we discount anything that's being said, but we know that it's prevalent. It's also the same with people with a trauma history. A lot of folks with IDD and trauma, they'll also have an ADHD diagnosis, and there is some overlap there because that person may invade someone's space, right? They may cut people off when they're talking and they may easily lose things and things like that. So the behaviors are very similar, but the context may be different. I may have autism and I didn't get any social skills training, but you're talking about something that I totally like. So I'm just going to jump in the conversation, invade everybody's personal space, cut everybody off. And the mental health practitioner that's looking at it is like invading people's space, cutting people off, rambling on. They're looking at it from a mental health lens. But what if I don't know that in a regular conversation, I don't come up into your face, that I have to give you some space? What if it's a sensory thing that I'm just in your face and I don't even realize that that's uncomfortable, right? It's like somebody who's eating and they've got crumbs all over their face, and you keep saying, you don't feel that on your face? Brush that off. That's a
Mhm.
sensory thing. They may not feel that. They may not even know it's there. So we see it a lot. A lot of it, it could very well be that there's the autism, the ADHD, the post-traumatic stress disorder. When I work with people, I respect whoever the clinician was that came up with whatever. So I just work as an interventionist. I'm not even really interested in why this is or why it's not. I am all about, I'm going to modify the environment. I'm going to do a preference assessment. I'm going to find out what you like and what you don't like. And then I'm going to make sure that I train everybody to kind of like support you based on what you've said, because honoring people's preferences, validating their feelings, strength spotting, find out what they do well. That's a positive psychology thing that I totally like. And I see how we can shift behaviors when we say, hey, you really did a good job today. You helped me by bringing in all these bags. I'm so tired. You're such a good helper. Hey, you look really good in pink. You need to wear pink more often. You know, things like that. All of those things are, very helpful.
Okay. I was particularly interested in that because when I did direct practice with kids who had autism and they were diagnosed with ADHD, sometimes they would be taking two medications for ADHD, and there would still be concerns from their support team, whether it was like the school or parents, that some of the behaviors were still manifesting that they were trying to suppress using medication. And so I just always felt like, well, maybe the medication is not addressing the appropriate diagnosis. You're looking for one thing and you've completely missed it, and now this child is being medicated. So that's one of the things that I've always been interested in whenever I see people that are dually diagnosed with ADHD and autism.
Just say that medication by itself is also not going to cure and fix everything. We're never going to medicate away behaviors. Again, I go back to how do we support people? How do we modify that environment? If I have somebody that's on medications, they're doing everything that the doctor says that they're supposed to do, and we're still seeing extra energy and whatever, I will typically tell the providers, look at that preference assessment, update the preference assessment, see what that person is into. And if they're running around, let's run them out. Where's the staff? Everybody put on your shoes. Let's go do wall sits, jumping jacks. Let's go make a competition. Run from one end of the driveway to the next. Make it a game, because that's part of who that person is, right? Because you've got great people working on medications and we're still seeing X, Y, and Z. Why don't we use that to their benefit? Get them involved, get them excited. I say that a lot to group home folks. And after a while, I don't have to work the cases because they're going to the gym, they're on that Peloton, they're raking leaves, they're running around, they're getting very active. And then they are literally getting more tired. And then you're putting a routine and a schedule in place. We always tell people to calm down and it's time for you to relax and it's nighttime now. And what if that person doesn't really understand what you're talking about? What if not only does the person carry a diagnosis for autism, but what if there's also a brain injury, fetal alcohol syndrome? What if they were exposed to substances in utero, right? And their memory is just not what you assume it should be. What if that person did learn coping skills, but they don't remember? So we literally must teach, and we don't wait till the person is escalated to say, use your coping skills. No, it becomes part of the routine. So if I know you're full of energy by the time you get off the school bus or by the time you come home from your work or your day program, I'm going to get you very, very active. Whether you're helping to set the table, whether you're helping to prepare meals, whether you're doing something with the laundry, you're looking up activities for the weekend, I'm going to identify what your skills are, what you like to do. If you're somebody that's a gamer, or if you want to learn how to bake, I may send you to go look up recipes. You and I may go to the store and I send you down all the aisles to find all the things that we saw on this YouTube video that we're gonna do, do all of that. The way we get people involved is to identify their strengths, identify their interests, work with that. And literally, we should be teaching coping and calming and soothing skills 3 to 4 times per day. When somebody gets triggered, their rational brain shuts down. All we're getting is an emotional response. So when we're talking to people, calm down, use those skills. No, that's all gone through the window. In that moment, I'm either going to fight, I'm either going to run away, or I'm just going to stand there, right? So whatever that should look like, we've got to teach people, because a lot of folks cannot calm themselves down. They may not even know when they're from 0 to 100, because they're not focused on, is my heart beating fast? Do I feel hot all of a sudden? Do I feel something uncomfortable in my stomach? They're not thinking about that, because nobody's connected those dots. That's why biofeedback and neurofeedback is so important, because people don't really realize that they're from 0 to 100. And I always tell people about medications. I can't remember which psychiatrist told me this. I don't remember if it was Dr. Hedden or Dr. Brown, but somebody told me some years ago, medications, yeah, we're going to put them in place. The person's from 0 to 100. All medication is going to do is take him from 0 to 40. You've got to come in there, Dr. Price, and bring in some other things in your toolbox, because I'm not going to medicate away everything, but I get you 0 to 40. And then you have enough time to get in there to run your interventions and try some other things.
That's good. That's good. And I love that, because a lot of times, especially like in a school setting, some schools, not all schools, but some schools really push medicating kids to make the classrooms, or to make the behaviors or the presentations in a classroom more manageable.
Mm-hmm.
So not a lot of staff understand that medication is not going to do 100% of the work. So the fact that you're explaining, like, no, it's not going to completely eradicate everything, but here's what medication can do. I think that's such a key component in helping people understand signs and symptoms.
Yeah. And, the thing is, we want miracles to happen and we want behaviors to stop overnight. But if I don't like being in math class and I know after I leave math, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm already kind of clumsy and I really don't like playing sports. And I know that I have to do all these things. I'm already anxious. I'm already not in the mood for any of these things. So yeah, you're probably going to see some type of behavior. And again, that's why it's important for us to know the people that we're supporting. And if I have learned for the last 5 years, if I am disruptive and I start breaking things and cursing people out and flipping over tables, if I've learned that if I do that behavior, you're going to call my mom, you're going to send me to the office, you're going to tell me to clock out and come back another day because I'm just not having a good shift, those behaviors are ingrained. Those are powerful reinforcers. And I've been doing it for a while without even thinking I can flip over the table. I can do all of these things. I got to teach you some replacement behavior that is just as powerful. That's going to
Mhm.
give you exactly what it is that you're looking for. And if I know that you can tolerate math, but then you're going to band practice, you really want to be a part of the band, but it's a lot of stimulation. And that's where people see the behaviors and they may say, well, I don't understand Dr. Price because this is what he wants to do. He wants to be a part of it, but then we see behaviors. And I may come in and say, well, can we get OT between the ending of the math and before we go to band practice? Maybe we need to do some stretching, some relaxation, some deep breathing, some blowing bubbles, whatever that the OT is going to suggest. Maybe we need to put that in place so he can tolerate this other activity,
Mhm.
right? Because we want to honor preferences and we want to help people. But yeah, we shouldn't rely on medications alone. And I always say we must come into spaces and understand cultural humility. We must understand the people who we serve. If you love the people, you serve the people. And if you serve the people, you must love the people. And in order for me to do that, I can't come in and say, I don't see race, I don't see culture, I don't see anything. I just come in and I do my job. That means you're really not seeing me. And if I am working with a family or with a person that comes from a different country and they look at medications a certain way, I'm not going to come in and demand that you do this and you do that because I want to be respectful.
Mhm.
It's if you think about what's going on in the state of Minnesota, where folks from Somalia, all of these children are diagnosed with autism. And the Somalis are like, what are you talking about? First of all, that word doesn't even exist in my language. I only learned that word autism when I came to America. So that'd be very difficult for me to come in and say, yeah, your kid's got autism. You need to do this, you need to do that. We first must understand that in their culture, autism is not a word that is in their language. So, how are we going to tell them you need to do X, Y, and Z? So, I say we must not be culturally competent. We need to be more than that. We need to come in with cultural humility and find out from that person. And sometimes we have to have those courageous conversations, those crucial conversations. And if you're working with an indigenous person, maybe it's a Lumbee, somebody from, from the Lumbee tribe or whatever, we've got to level set and understand like, yeah, your people were not treated nicely. You all have been marginalized. Your history from generation to generation, there's a lot of evidence that, they stripped you of your language. They stripped you of your way of life. They stripped you of your culture. All of those things mean something because indigenous people are going to transfer that oral history to their children, and to whomever, because that passes down. So we got to make sure that when we come into spaces, we understand the culture of the people we work with. We understand what are their spiritual preferences. We understand about their religious preferences. All of these things must be considered before we start to tell people, you need to do this, you need to do that. Is like if we don't know who's at the center of the family, how family is seen in their culture, we may end up, offending people with our ignorance. So cultural humility is very important, and we cannot come into spaces as if we're the experts. We're not the expert. We're here to be the student and learn from that person. So humility is a very big thing, because that child that you think may need medication, they could come from another country and they've never heard that word before. And they lived there all of their life. And they've never seen all of the things that we're talking about. So I think we must start out with respect and dignity, and figuring out if this family is against medication, what else can we do to help them? Because we shouldn't be forcing people in a corner to do things because we feel like it's easy.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things that I wanted to backtrack for the listeners, I guess you could say, like, throughout spans of time and a definite span of time, at first it was everyone wanted to be culturally competent, where the goal was just to understand other people's culture. And then the language shifted a little bit to cultural sensitivity, where it was, okay, understanding that people have differences and being respectful of those. Whereas now the goal and the language is more so cultural humility, which is what you've been mentioning, where we go from acknowledging differences, we go from trying not to be offensive to becoming students to some degree, and always learning about differences and how we can accommodate, respect, and it's not necessarily commingle, but how we can not assume that we know everything about a person's culture or how a person's culture impacts their life because we've been culturally competent or culturally sensitive in the past. So just for anyone that's listening, cultural humility is more of like we could say it's more like a lifestyle. So think of it more as a perpetual learning process where we're always learning about other people and what they believe and what they're exposed to and how they live versus something that's a little more dated or something that's a little more concise.
Yeah, Maya Angelou said, if you know better, you do better. And as we extend our knowledge, and as the literature is there and people are sharing more and more, then we also can't become complacent. We also have to rise to that occasion and do things differently. And with cultural humility, I think it really helps us to understand the subjective experiences of people,
Mm-hmm.
because we may have many differences, but we have so many other things that we're similar about. Everyone wants to be treated with respect. Everyone wants to live in a safe community. We all want to have quality food to eat. We don't want to hear that, there's a war going on here and it's going to affect us. We want to be able to provide for our families. We want our families to be healthy. So if once you break down all of the barriers, you'll see that we've got so many things that makes us very similar than those things that make us so unique. And being unique is not a bad thing. It's a great thing, because it gives the people around you an opportunity to learn and grow. Anderson in 2010 wrote a book and he was talking about gracism. And I tell people that I am a gracist. And I have to say it a couple of times because people, they hear like, what? Gracist? What does that mean? Yeah, I'm a gracist. And I practice gracism, because when I don't know something, I'm going to come into that space and let you know I don't know. I want to learn about you. What did you do typically in your country during the holiday? What traditions did you have? Do you want that to be a part of the work we do together? Those things are very important. So I stand with people. I stand up for marginalized people. And if giving me something is taking away from other people, then I'm going to go to the back and be with those other people. But we have to stand with people. We've got to empower the most marginalized and vulnerable people in our community. And we have to make spaces welcoming, because we all say, oh, we're very inclusive. We include people with disabilities. But I beg to differ, because why do we have a special needs day at the county fair? Why do we have a special needs day for bowling? Why can't spaces just be designed to include all people? Why does going to the movies become such a big deal? You've got maybe automatic doors to let the person in that's in a wheelchair, and that's all great. But then you get to the bathroom and they can't manipulate the faucet. Why can't we design the spaces so that everybody can be included? Because when they say, well, we bring you to the table and you're a part of this conversation, you may include me in the room, but are you really listening to what I have to say? So belonging is very important. It's not only good enough to be included in spaces. I will feel like I belong when the space is designed to be welcoming of me. So I think that we must start to think more about the perception and those hidden messages, the things that we don't see, but we do see because of how things look, that people are excluded. And even though we say we don't institutionalize people, they're a part of their community, it's really not that way. Because people with disabilities, they're like spectators, they're tourists in their own communities. They're just sitting by and watching everyone else have fun because the systems are just not set up for them. You have people with autism that would make great people working in offices because they're organized. They can file things, right? They do that at home in wherever they live. Why can't we put things in place so these people can be employed? So humility is learning about people and not being afraid to say, look, I don't know. I understand that coming to this country as a refugee must be hard. I understand that for religious reasons or whatever you are here. Can you explain to me about your religion if that's okay? Because I don't want to offend. Can you tell me what I need to do? It's like the Muslim family. They're in the middle of Ramadan and you come over and you're just chomping away at your food and you didn't know anything that they're fasting. You know what I mean? So I think humility is very important.
Definitely. Thank you. This has been very informative. I'm excited for essentially having or creating with this conversation a resource for people who may not necessarily understand how autism shows up, but how we can better support people that may be displaying just a need for compassion, particularly whenever we're interacting or just like you said, just minding your business in public instead of being a person that feels compelled to make a comment or shoot a nasty glance, just being the person to kind of mind your business and
Picking up your phone and start recording or
yes, yes,
clear out of the area and looking like you're upset. Let's just chill out. Everybody just relax and be be respectful. And today with social media, I follow a lot of people with autism, right? And these parents and these adults, they're sharing. If you don't know something, go look, go read and dispel the rumors. I tell people all the time, I work with folks and people think that I'm a specialist and I'm doing all of this. And that's all well and good. But I get so much more out of those interactions with people with disabilities. I've supported people in the last 18 years that, they may move out of state and I become natural support. I am now a friend. And until you have volunteered, until you have been friends with people with disabilities, you have no idea how lacking your life is. You have no idea how lacking your life is. We shouldn't be afraid of what we don't know. Because when we start to have those conversations, we're going to see, oh my gosh, this person is hilarious. We both like to have, we both like sushi. We like the same music. It's all of those things. And at the end of the day, everybody wants to belong. Maslow's theory of hierarchy states that, once we have our food, our shelter, and all of those things, we start to move up that pyramid of needs. And belonging is serious. Every person wants to belong. Nobody wants to be mistreated. Everybody wants a friend, a boyfriend, a church to say they're a part of something. And so if we start thinking that way and being more engaging with people, and when we don't know something, go and get information, because being ignorant is no excuse today.
big time, big time. Thank you so much, Dr. Price. I want to give you an opportunity to do your shameless plug, which is basically when you let everyone know where they can find you social media wise, any events that you have coming up, anything that you would like them to know that you're working on, any projects, merchandise. This is your time to shine.
My shameless plug.
Yes,
Okay. All
ma'am.
right. Here is my book. It's called The Good Stuff. And this was published and released June of, gosh, 2023, because now we're in 2024. But it's called The Good Stuff. It's practical and positive supports for people with intellectual disabilities and co-occurring mental illness. And you can find it on Amazon and on the NAD website, which is the National Association for the Dually Diagnosed. I am several conferences coming up in this year. Not really sure of the exact dates, but I know I will be in Phoenix for convention. And just, I'm doing a lot of writing. If people want to reach out to me, I am on LinkedIn. That's where I'm at, where if you want to find out information about what's going on. But this book, The Good Stuff, I really believe it should be required reading, whether it's for family members or people in school or direct support staff. I think because we are making it very practical, showing people, let's get rid of all these, the myth and the stigma. Let's just work. Let's just be respectful. Let's just honor people's preferences. Let's honor people's pronouns. Let's share with people, what information it is that they need. How do we support people to live their best possible life? And that's really what I'm about, because I believe I have a moral, a social, and an ethical responsibility to improve the life of people. And I do that in partnership with the person with disability, because they deserve the same things that I deserve. And they're the most marginalized people in our society. And it's time that stops. Not in 2024. This shouldn't be happening where people are marginalized and stigmatized because of a disability. We need to partner with them because they have a voice. They know exactly what they need, but we need to be respectful and we need to be allies. Ally with the person with disability, and you will see how much better your life will be. It's a beautiful thing. Nothing to be afraid of. We must think about that moral, social, and ethical responsibility to leave this place better than we saw it.
I love that for so many reasons. I love that. Thank you. Do you have any final points that you feel like you want to share, or was that your final point that you
That's
just
my
mentioned?
that's my final point. I'm just saying, love people, respect people, treat people with dignity, and become a gracist. Practice gracism and offer grace, because you know what? We're all flawed. We're all imperfect beings. So offer grace.
That's good. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Price. It's been a privilege. I appreciate it. I'm hoping that people, caregivers, parents, whomever, that as we encounter people who may have special needs or disabilities, that we have a different perspective that we can kind of glean from now. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you. The pleasure is all mine. Any chance I get to talk about this and disseminate information, it's really what I'm all about. So thank you for thinking of me and inviting me. This has been wonderful.
Yes, ma'am. If you've liked what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us reach more people who might benefit from these type of conversations. Also, we'd love to hear your thoughts and questions about today's episode. Reach out on Instagram at Marisha Cares or send an email to contact@callmarisha.com. Your feedback and stories are always welcome. Last, make sure you check out show notes for inspirational bonuses.